The killing rampage of University of Santa Barbara student Elliot Rodger on May 23, 2014, earned him a recognition and notoriety which had eluded him throughout his 22-year-old life. Despite being raised in privilege and affluence, the emptiness and his inability to function socially tormented his core, culminating in an explosive fury. No one claims to have saw it coming, and yet the signs were everywhere. During the probable afternoon and early evening of May 23rd, Rodger fatally and repeatedly stabbed his two roommates and a visiting friend of theirs to death. His rampage had begun. There would be a gap of time before he continued his subsequent killing spree. Between approximately 8:30 and 9 p.m., Rodger methodically sat in his car in the apartment parking lot for approximately 45 minutes, uploading his final video correspondence and an email manifesto from his laptop computer. He was attempting to justify the unexplainable, and now he knew he was short on time. He had no exit strategy. He was armed for combat with nearly 600 rounds of ammunition, 2 pistols, and 2 knives. He drove 4 blocks north from the parking lot to the Alpha Phi sorority house, exited his car, and began aggressively knocking on the front door. He anticipated that an open door would liberate a perceived lifetime of rejection. Instead, he was met by a familiar response: silence. No one bothered to answer his aggressive knocking. He returned to his coupe alone
because he actually
once
wanted
again.
to get in there and massacre the whole.
A group of sorority sisters, strolling about 20 feet away, became his secondary targets. He fired at them through the car's lowered window, killing 2 and wounding 1. The women could neither resist nor flee. His 8-minute suicidal binge was nearly half completed. Heading south, he fired indiscriminately into a coffee shop window that was fortunately closed. A cluster of friends heard the shooting in the distance and ducked into a nearby deli market. Christopher Michaels Martinez viewed the approaching black coupe from the doorway. He was shot to death by a stray fuselage from Rodger's gun. Michaels Martinez became simply one more stranger and another dead victim. He also became Rodger's last fatality. Four Foot Patrol officers saw Rodgers flee in his black BMW. Suddenly, the hunter had become the prey. Leaving the market location on Pardal Road, he turned right and continued southbound on El Embarcadero del Mar. He continued for 4 blocks. At the top of the loop, near Perfect Park, he fired upon 2 pedestrians. He missed both. Isla Vista is a particularly tightly bound community. He was now isolated into a space of approximately 2 square blocks. He had very little room to maneuver at this point, and he was dealing with one-way streets. At this point, he continued down El Embarcadero until he reached Del Playa Drive, and there he turned right. He would return to this street later with fatal consequences. While he was driving down Del Playa, a one-way street, he struck a bicyclist. Throughout the course of Rodger's insane weave-and-fire driving, he shot unsteadily and generally randomly at most of his pedestrians. The claustrophobic one-way avenues of Isla Vista hemmed his mobility, and law enforcement personnel were armed and in heavy pursuit and he had very few options to maneuver. He drove 2 blocks west on Del Playa Drive. At the intersection of Camino del Sur and Sabato Tarde, he fired multiple times at pedestrians. 3 he wounded. As he headed to the intersection of Sabato Tarde and El Embarcadero, he turned right. As he continued on El Embarcadero in the direction of Del Playa again, he fired upon 4 officers. This time they returned the fire. 1 bullet struck him in the hip. He was now wounded. El Playa Drive, he struck a bicyclist. The bicyclist flipped up into the air and landed on his windshield, crashing into the car. His vehicle struck 2 parked cars and remained stationary. Two sheriff's deputies cautiously approached the car with the intent upon arresting Rodger. There was little point. He had put his gun to his temple and pulled the trigger. His actions remained unexplainable. No one would fully understand his private hell and why he chose to deprive others of their own life.